Where were we? Last time, Tex Avery was hired by Schlesinger as a full-fledged director. His debut short was Gold Diggers of 49, which established a whole different approach compared to what the studios had offered up to that point. Less musical numbers in favor of more comedy. Unlike Freeling and King, Avery didn't have to work his way up at Schlesinger Studios thanks to his early experience at Waterland Studios, which allowed him to get his own building, the Termite Terrace, and exclusive contribution of the likes of Chuck Jones, Bob Clampett, Virgil Ross and Sid Sutherland in his unit, as well as possibly some other names. Given such a premise, it's undeniable Avery had star power in his staff, and also more notable potential than Freeling and King on paper. In fact, it seems like the real attraction of 1936, a very eventful year in which a lot of stuff occurred, like the introduction of opening and closing rings in Freeling's I Wanna Play House, the classic zooming Warner Shield, the departures of composers Bernard Brown and Norm Spencer, and of director Jack King, who'd joined Disney, but also the promotion of Frank Tashlin on the role in Porky's Poultry Plant, which features a brand new composer, perhaps the composer of the classic cartoon era, Carl William Stalling. All of those characters introduced in I Haven't Got a Hat didn't go that far, leaving very small impressions. All but the stuttering pig, who had what it takes to become the studio's first ever mascot. Nevertheless, as far as quality goes, 1936 may be better than 35, but feels quite a mixed bag, due to King's poor performance and Freeling still being remote from his true dimension. Accordingly, the most interesting ideas happen to belong to that quote-unquote newcomer, who is indeed the main attraction, both for his qualities and his sense. In fact, I always considered Avery a pretty polarizing supervisor, especially during his time at Warner's, because he's definitely got humorous potential, and he knows that. But wouldn't you believe, such an awareness is paradoxically his main issue as well. With that said, his 36 is overall a pretty decent tier, and we definitely have to acknowledge how much his contribution changed their perspective, as he simply had to raise a doubt. Are musical numbers that mandatory? At last, someone indicated the road to evolution, that is, changing atavical habits, with humor becoming more of a priority over melodies for their own sake. Avery's cultural experience includes the reliance on puns, visual gags, the constant fourth wall break, the extension of jokes, and flashes of meta-humor, as seen in the Village Smithy, which features the camel from Little Bo Porky. While such a device wouldn't sound as astonishing nowadays, it was quite an innovation for its time, as well as a very clever joke. Once more, his first full year at Warner's comes off as decently consistent, as its lows are not as catastrophic as in his following 5 years, due to his excessive awareness of his own skills, which we're going to see in a while. Although maybe it's just me, but his estimated masterpieces showcase some issues that true masterpieces should never own. As a matter of fact, I do consider a few of them a bit overrated. In detail, let's see which shorts of his did and did not hit the mark. First of all, his Looney Tunes shorts feature Porky as the protagonist, whilst Merrie Melodies entries involve one-way characters, and in spite of the latter's technicolor advantage, a veiling of an actual mascot gives more substance to his Looney entries, as Avery can actually use Porky's stutter as a humor source. For example, Plain DIPPY features Porky willing to join the US Army Air Corps, but his stutter impedes him from spelling and even writing his own name, or makes him unable to pilot a robot plane vocally. All in all, it's a pretty solid cartoon, with plenty of funny scenes like the entire second half, with Porky dealing with the robot plane following Little Kitty's commands unbeknownst to her, which results in one of the very first ludicrous climaxes of the studios. The pacing may not be the most appropriate, but the result is definitely promising. The Blowout introduces one of Avery's main formulas, the hounding plot we'll eventually see in Tortoise Beats Hair, DUMB-HOUNDED and Northwest Hounded Police at MGM. So compared to these two iconic shorts, this one seems apparently at its early stage, given a much less aggressive and rapid-fire pacing. Nonetheless, this remains his most successful formula, as this is Avery's best cartoon of the year. The way Porky's good nature is handled makes perfect sense for both his personality and also for the plot. plot, as he picks items dropped by bystanders in order to gain pennies in exchange, so he constantly tries to give the Mad Bomber his own time bomb back throughout the picture, causing the latter to panic and escape. This is possibly one of his finest contributions at Warner's, I dare to state, in spite of its perfectible pacing, since it's got its humorous moments like Clampet's Merrie penny dance, so iconic, or the entire ludicrous hounding sequence, a classic AVERY-esque setting ending on a satisfying note. I mean, this might actually be the very first good Warner Brothers cartoon, a quite underestimated gem. The Village Smithy is another solid effort, further strengthened by Porky's softer design, looking less like a real swine and more like a proper cartoon character, and by Stolin's competent score. It's got its highlights, like the convenient narration of the first act, the rubber horseshoe scene, albeit a bit too long, and the last 2 minutes of pure surrealism, even in reverse. Again, pacing isn't top-notch, but content is still pretty much enjoyable. Contrary to what would occur during Bob Clampet's burnout later on, Porky Pig actually proves to be a functional mascot in Avery's Looney Tunes, as his presence serves as solid glue for his stories and gags, thus impeding him from falling into his more morbid habits, which unfortunately get to shine way more in his Merrie Melodies series. In fact, aforementioned shorts do represent the flip side of his 1936 coin. Quite a discrepancy between the black and white, straightforward, brazen and more humble Looney Tunes and the colorful, innovative, yet pretentious, cutesy and not so substantial Merrie Melodies. The question is, without a proper protagonist, it's quite easier to lose interest in an animated product, so it's the director's duty to make it as captivating as possible, and even if Avery sometimes succeeded, it wouldn't still be sufficient to conceal his faults. Let's take Page Miss Glory, often viewed as a masterpiece for being a visually daring product, but I actually view it as a mere mixed bag, in which form is more overriding than substance. I'm not saying it's irredeemably bad, the first-person POV scene looks great, the build-up of the olive bit is satisfying, yet it could be better paced, it just feels old-fashioned, not vintage like old, more like dusty spiderweb like old. First off, the story is non-existent, and the majority of the gags exhibits Avery's habit of dragging a potentially amusing moment for so much time, it actually becomes tedious and unfunny, like the leaf ballet scene, which starts off with a decent premise, but drags out even after the gag is over. Or the elevator scene, which happens to be way worse, because its background music sounds so boring. Even John Seeley's stock music had some dignity compared to this bore. Okay, that was too far, but seriously, doesn't even seem to belong to the same short. Orchestral crescendos? Pfft, who needs those when we have monotonous tunes? Furthermore, the main fault of this short is Adler. He plain sucks. I nearly take back what I stated about Bosco and Buddy because he's a blander, uglier and even more annoying main character. And he actually manages to sound as equally bothersome as Bernice Hansen.
All for Miss Glory! All for Miss Glory!
Since for some reason they thought letting him sing would be groovy. Spoilers, it wouldn't. This is just way too pretentious and cocky for a cartoon to be considered a masterpiece. Next up, I love to sing, which at least is not as baffling as Page Miss Glory. It's got a proper plot and the premise is actually creative, given an owl family who is into classical music, but one of their children is into jazz, much to his father's shocking annoyance. This demonstrates another one of Avery's limits, that is losing its way when he has to depict cutesy characters by enhancing their softer setup, sacrificing humor in return. While such an issue isn't that exaggerated here, unlike in shorts like The Mediocre I'd Love to Take Orders From You or A Sunbonnet Blue, it regardless doesn't make me enjoy the story as much as I should. That's the exact reason why I sometimes can't understand Avery properly. Why does he tend to degenerate his creed? Why does he neglect his humor in favor of cute setups? Why is this conclusion so abrupt? It ends with the Howled's father finally proving his tendency for jazz, and everybody dances, everyone is happy, there is no climax, there is no payoff, there is no funny gag, simply a cutesy epilogue that has nothing to do with Avery's directing skills. Still, despite the gap between his Looney and Merrie entries, he remains the main attraction of a pretty strange year, filled with important events but also unexpected tumbles.